Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 110 of the Peak of Serenity podcast. I am one of your hosts, Emallson, and joining me as always, we have my co host, Anomoly.
Hello.
And this week, we're talking mostly more about Dragonflight stuff. We've got a whole new class that we barely even mentioned last week.
Forgot about it.
Lots of new stuff with that new race, of course, that goes with it. And we also have some pretty substantial updates to the profession system. So we're gonna be talking about all of that today. But before we get into that, uh, progression update, which since we were both on Halandris means Halandris update
Update.
mostly.
It's dead. It like what a joke of a so I don't know about you, but the first poll on Tuesday we had was through the P2 transition, which was the furthest we'd ever gotten up to that point. We'd never seen the P2
Yeah,
transition. We just sort of YOLO'd our way through it and ended up in P3 with probably 4 or 5 people dead. So we weren't gonna kill it that poll, but yeah,
yeah,
the nerfs are absolutely massive. Um That's to be fair, I told a buddy of mine who's not there from a progression perspective yet, but I think that's a 40 pull boss at this point.
yeah.
Maybe even less. It's nowhere near touching 100. I'd say maybe 40, 50 pulls and you kill that
Yeah,
thing.
I mean, it took us another, I think, 10, maybe 12 pulls to kill it Friday.
Uh-huh.
And we did the same thing as you did. Like our first pull into the phase 2 intermission, I think we reached phase 3. If we didn't, it was like right at the end of the walk to phase 3.
Yeah,
But then spent another 8 pulls just like dying to planet cracker beams, the story.
exactly.
Um
Exactly.
and then killed it. And it's like they ruined the boss. Like it's still a fine boss. It's not the boss that it was. So from a tanking
No.
perspective, this was a very intense boss where like every single tank beam mattered. You had to hit all of them. If you didn't hit all of them, there was a slim chance you could get lucky and 2 orbs would spawn in the same place and you could recover.
Yep.
But now we push the boss so fast that you can actually miss half of them
Yeah.
because the second set of them won't reach the boss before you push.
Yeah. Yeah, the health nerf, everything from that made those essentially it's literally, can you do the walk? That's the hard part of the fight now, is can you time. And now with the 30-second duration, you don't think you pass once, maybe twice in the P2 transition you'll pass, but that was really before. It was the tank, the interface stuff was difficult. There was a slight DPS check in P2 to make sure you made it through that reclaim, right? Or made sure you push him before that reclaim.
Yeah.
But now it's the phase 1 and phase 2 just do enough damage to not get reclaim and you win.
Yeah.
And then P3 becomes a difficult one. And it's just making sure you can do the walk the second intermission. So yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I understand. So looking at the nerfs, right? If we go through them, basically the biggest one that people are going to notice is that the bombs now have a 30-second duration, which is triple the amount of time. They typically, you'd have to pass the bombs every 10 seconds. Now you have to pass them every 30 seconds. Um, which is easier, much easier, right?
Yeah.
And essentially what it does is it eliminates the difficulty in passing as you're moving, right? That was really
Yeah.
where I think a lot of the passing difficulty came, is those intermissions, as you're sort of trying to run, staying ahead of the knockbacks, passing the bombs. And they sort of remove that with the need to only do that maybe once, twice an intermission phase, right? So that
Right.
lowers it there. But then on top of that, they nerfed did missile damage by 20%. So to be fair, you probably just need one cooldown. The healing requirement isn't that hard to top between anymore. They reduced his health by 10%, which again just makes missing reclaims now every time so much easier. And then they also what's Eternity's engine? Is that
It's
the
just
AoE
red
damage?
ticking damage. It's just the
Yeah.
ticking damage that's always going on.
Yeah. So I mean, all of that stuff combined with now P3 being like, instead of having 3 areas to cover, you only have 2.
Yeah.
Right? It's
Yeah.
just the fight's free. I mean, if you have any amount of pulls into it at this point, you should have killed it this week within 10 to 15 pulls anyway. And then if you're about to start this, like I said, it's a 40 pull boss to get to it.
Yeah, I mean the major thing. So there is one area that we ran into that did still wipe us in the phase two transition, and that was actually people holding onto their bombs for too long. They weren't blowing them up, but if they were holding them on until basically right before a shatter and then dropping them
Gotcha.
because they couldn't hold them any longer. They had to drop them there. But because it was right before the shatter right before the shatter went off, then everybody gets knocked away from them and the planet cracker beams come from behind and now those bombs are inaccessible and I like superheroed for one with bubble.
Yeah.
But you know, you can't save them all. And really, so the solution there was to drop them 5 seconds early and the next person just picks it up.
Yeah.
Because the other thing
Exactly.
about the duration change, so it used to be that the debuff lasted 6 seconds longer than you could hold the bomb,
Hmm.
or 60% of the time you could hold the bomb. Now it lasts like what 2/30? What's that? I can't even math right now. It's not very much. It's like 5% of the time you can hold
Yeah.
the bomb. It's
Yeah.
nothing. So there's actually a thing you can do um, where like you can just have, and I did this a couple times. Is just like tank does a drive by, picks up the bomb for 2 seconds, and then drops it again,
Yep.
and then the other person can just pick it up when their debuff expires.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the one thing we also wiped to that, and we basically did it where you everybody just drops their bombs when the wall drops, and then everybody else picks it up right after that. Like the second person,
Yeah,
then the way it times out is 30 seconds later. I think it's right after the second knock. You
yeah,
can drop and
and then
re-pick up
you can
before the
drop
third
it and
knock.
pick it up. Yeah,
Yeah, but yeah, I mean that's the fight was it. Like I get the amount of nerfs right, and I get why they wanted to do it, but it seemed like they wanted people to move past it quickly, right? Like
yeah,
this is like the type of nerfs where they were like, we don't want like because in a lot of cases Blizzard will like slow roll nerfs on bosses where they're like slowly bring the difficulty down so that
yeah.
more and more guilds can kill it, right? But here it seemed like they're like, no, we want people to be done and farming this raid
Yes,
before the next season, right? And
yes,
maybe and it almost seems, and this is me tinfoil hatting this a little bit, is that it almost seems like they're going to have this expansion ready sooner than we think. This is where my mind goes with stuff like
Ian
this.
did
It's
say
like,
alpha was soon. We're gonna talk about interview stuff this
yeah,
week or later in the podcast. But Ian did say this week that the alpha was going to be soon without the TM.
yeah,
So
right,
um,
exactly. Which to me thinks like a May release for that, which means they want to push as many guilds as they can through this content, which
yeah.
is like what the like these nerfs essentially take this from like Painsmith levels, right? If you think about that, like
So
even the Painsmith nerfs weren't this hard.
I want the Painsmith nerfs were a joke. Half of them weren't actually like real nerfs.
No,
Uh,
they made it harder,
yeah.
or they didn't change the
So
difficulty, right? I guess.
they
So
just made you relearn it. So the guilds that already did
yeah,
it had to do some reprog, and the guilds that hadn't done it yet had an easier overlap. But I want to pull
yeah.
up the prog stats for this because it's insane. It is
Oh, is it?
insane. I have not
I was gonna
seen
ask you about.
a chart like this. Like I can pull up. I think I can pull up Jaina, and it's gonna look similar if I have enough Jaina data. But um, look at this shit. Look at it. Oh,
So
over
excited.
150 kills this week.
That's absolutely nuts.
Literally doubled. Just like it's going up, it's going up, it's going up. Big vertical spike the
Yeah,
week of the nerfs. It's just absolutely gutted the boss. And so Berthikins in chat is saying that, you know, they don't mind heavy nerfs after 3 months into a tier. And I think that misses a little bit with this tier for two reasons, or for this boss for two reasons. First off, a lot of guilds this tier actually didn't start Mythic until 2 or 3 weeks after Mythic opened. Like we were still doing heroic splits, not splits, but like heroic clears for a lot of our raid time for the
right.
first 2 3 weeks of Mythic because of how impactful getting that tier gear was. It was just so much more impactful than any Mythic drops. Um, so then the other thing is this boss is just really fun. Was just really fun.
Yep.
And the way that it got nerfed removed a lot of the things that were fun about it. This
Yeah.
isn't something like if this were Fate Scribe, if you literally just took Fate Scribe and you put him here in this raid and you made him as difficult as Halandras was, I would be celebrating about these nerfs. Just absolutely over the moon that I
That's the
would not
boring
have to pull
part.
this boss anymore. But I was looking forward to spending 6 hours on Halandras this week. You know, I wouldn't
Right.
like, I mean, obviously I would like to kill it before the full 6 hours, but I was looking forward to getting to spend more time on this boss because it's fun.
Yeah.
It's really fun. Um, and so the um, nerfs were so extreme that it just like it was really disappointing that it took that fun away, and now that fun is just gone. It can't like maybe we get it back in season 4. You know, maybe season 4 Halandras is you know, this big glorious thing that is everything that we all enjoyed about Halandras,
Yep.
but maybe it's just the same thing but with a random Mythic Plus affix slapped on it.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, this just seemed like they could have slow rolled this a little bit. Like maybe the bomb
Yeah,
detonation goes to 20 seconds instead of 30, right?
yeah,
Maybe they don't make the missile damage as much. They leave the phase 3 pattern in place, right?
yeah.
Like do certain things like that to like slow roll into this, but this just seems like they're trying to either they were
Actually,
it just seems like they were unhappy with the amount of guilds stuck here, but like
yeah. I
I
mean,
think
there
the
were.
yeah,
There
probably. And I
weren't
think the
there
other
weren't
thing too
150 guilds that just started this boss this week and were stuck on it, or just started this
yeah.
boss this week and then just killed it this week. These are by and large guilds that had been progressing on it and
Mhm.
then just now it's nerfed and they killed it. Like
Yeah.
us, you know, I was 130 pulls in or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we were like just over 100, like 120 or something like that, I want to say. So, yeah, very similar. Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, the way that they pulled the trigger on this seems pretty heavy-handed, but
Yeah, I
and
mean,
I guess
honest.
the other thing too, and maybe the other thing too that they're seeing in their data, which we might not see, is that like a lot of people have tier sets. They have double legendaries. They have tier
Yeah,
sets that are mythic quality, right? Like
yeah,
I have basically, I mean, if I could get a pair of gloves from Mythic Plus, I'd essentially have mythic eye level tier pieces, right, up the board. And so it's the power increase you typically get by slowly getting more gear out of your vault or slowly getting more gear from earlier bosses isn't there. And so maybe we're just going to see similar things to bosses as we get into this. Is like they're just they're needing to levy heavier nerfs because you're not seeing the same power increases as a player
so I think
like you would.
Halandras is unique in the remainder of the tier in
Uh,
just how much easier it gets when you hit a certain damage threshold. Like when
that's
you
true
can
too. Yeah.
skip every reclaim, the boss gets so much easier. Like the tank mechanic gets so much easier. The reclaim, now you don't have to commit raid CDs to healing the reclaim. Now you commit them to healing the bridge.
Yeah, the intermissions, yeah, which is yeah makes those easier in general.
Um, so something like Lords of Dread is already significantly easier because of both the change that they made to uh the the swarm phase, as well as just we have more gear. The damage check is not a big deal now.
Exactly.
Anduin doesn't really have a meaningful DPS check. The Rygolon, we were actually talking about maybe 3 tanking Rygolon, so you can tell that the DPS check is not there. So that leaves like the Jailer. But I mean, from everything I've heard, I would rather have Halandras as the end boss than the Jailer as the end boss. And I know if they could wave a magic wand and just move Halandras to boss number 11 in the instance, that would have made me a lot happier. I would have been like, yes,
Yeah,
okay, we have to kill these other bosses now so that we can go and do more Halandras.
exactly. Exactly. It was a fun boss. I mean, even as a healer, there was always something to do, like the movement, and like there was never really a boring phase. And now, like to be fair, other than someone eating random damage, they shouldn't. There's not a ton of healing requirements in the phase, and then so it's only the intermissions at that point.
Yeah,
Intermissions is all about just positioning. So
yeah,
no, that's sucks for Halanders, but we did kill it, which was great.
yeah,
And we did start, at least our raid started Anduin progression. Anduin had some nerfs too. A ton of them. I don't so having not progressed on Anduin before this, before the nerfs, I don't know how much this impacts their Anduin pull count. Generally, it'll
yeah.
probably lower it, give you a little bit more leeway, but these did not seem as heavy-handed or as
They're not.
impactful as the Halandris nerfs, right?
It's still fundamentally the same fight. One of the big things it does is the intermission is going to be a little bit easier. That's the big abomination's health got reduced.
Hmm.
The fiendish souls, the missiles from those that kill people, are slower now, so you have more time to dodge. That's just going to reduce the amount of random wipes to that. The ad
Yep.
casts in the second phase, they get haste in Mythic when you kill one of the ads. So there's pretty significant, like, you have to keep them CC. You have to have a good CC rotation to do this.
Right.
They reduce the amount of bonus haste they get, which makes it easier, but it's still such a large number. I don't know if it matters.
Yeah.
Um, and then really the big thing is the downstairs phase. The despairs and the doubts have reduced health, which just makes it easier to do that without a blood decay. Effectively, it means that now you don't have to optimally stack them to cleave them down in order to get done in time. Now
Right.
you just have to, like, it's still a decent chunk of HP to chew through, but you can do it with whatever random tanks you've got. And, DK is good, but not mandatory.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah, so we started on that one this week. So we got a full Tuesday, or sorry, full Thursday. Well, not even a full, because we also, I don't think you said this on the podcast. We also had Lahuvum issues, but we
Yeah,
changed some of
we
our
did.
comp. We changed our healing comp a bit, so that I think caused some of the wipes, and then yeah. So we took a couple. We didn't clear everything on Tuesday, and then Thursday we cleaned up Lahuvum and then went to Anduin for probably about 3 hours or so, 3.5 hours. Got some pulls in there. I mean, we're still as a group wiping to like the first intermission, maybe not consistently, but fairly often.
First
And a
intermission or
lot of
first down phase?
sorry, first down phase, not intermission.
Yeah.
So first down phase. So and that's like a combination of like either over DPSing the souls and bringing people up early, or
Yeah.
not DPSing enough, or like our downstairs team not killing slash healing what they need to. So just a lot of stuff there, which in turn means we spent probably the last 45 minutes swapping groups so that our typical second group went down first so that they would have more practice, which again caused more issues because CD timers are all messed up. So it's just it
Yeah.
was it was a lot of ways. However, yeah, I was not there, so I'll have to basically live progression through you on Anduin at this point.
Yeah. I mean, my understanding is that the polls on Anduin are pretty front loaded. Like,
Yeah.
so I hadn't even thought about this, but there's no blasphemy in phase two or phase three. There's the
Yeah.
hopelessness thing in phase three, but the blasphemy mechanic is one of the, like, major sources of wipes, of just like,
Yep.
you touch a safe person and now you both blow up and now somebody else can't clear and they die, and it just
Chain, yeah.
cascades. That's one of the major areas that you wipe. One of the other ones is, like you were talking about with the downstairs, just like killing stuff, the lost souls too quickly, not killing them quickly enough, not getting your CC out on them, or
Right.
missing kills or heals downstairs, which is identical in phase one and phase two. So once you learn it in
Mhm.
phase one, you can just do it again in phase two.
Exactly, yeah.
So the pulls on Anduin seem fairly front loaded, um, but uh, we shall see. I have zero pulls on Anduin. We killed Halandros. We had a little bit of issues on our side with live them as well. The classic people not quite getting onto their stack markers in time. So even though they were there on their screen, the server disagreed and killed everyone.
Oh, jeez. Gotcha. Game don't lie. That's how I respond to that. Whenever someone in my raid says I was there, I'm like, game don't lie.
Yeah, it's really just like, so. What you see on your screen is, whatever your latency is to the server, it's that much ahead of the server.
Exactly, yeah.
So if you get there at the very last moment, well, the server says you were still a tenth of a second away. If
Yeah,
that's what your
exactly.
latency is. So it's not something that you can play being at the last second. So we like, it wasn't that much. We went like 7 times on it, but 7 times when you're actually getting the 8 and 9 minute pulls and almost getting to the end, and then two of your stacks just evaporate because their orange marker didn't make it to them.
Yeah, no, That's rough. I forget. I always forget. Like we talked about this, but I always forget how long that fight is.
Yeah,
Because it doesn't seem long when you're in it, but like and when you're done with it, you're like, damn, that was like a 9 minute fight, and
yeah,
like yeah, no, that's for sure. So um, well, cool. And then I guess there were some jailer nerfs. You can just finish this off. There was a handful of jailer nerfs. I think these are just to make the general fight easier.
yeah.
I don't think again these are major changes. It's just
There's
a handful of
actually
things.
a
Sorry.
sneaky brewmaster DPS nerf in this.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Jailer's melee attack decreased by 10% in mythic difficulty.
Ah, okay. So no Nizao shenanigans.
Niazao gets worse. It's actually a pretty noticeable change in how much damage you get out of Invoke Niazao. Kind of sucks, but
I'm sorry that as a tank you do less damage when you're only there to take damage, get beat up. So
you say that until the tank's the one getting you through the DPS. Like
it's
I
true.
played on Halandra's progression 3 different Paladin covenants. That was fun. I
Oh,
started off
nice.
as Necrolord in order to do healing in the
Hmm.
second intermission because I was also going to be taking the intermission, and Necrolord lets you do both.
Gotcha.
And then we needed to push the DPS check for Reclaim, so I switched to Venthyr. So
Okay.
I ate the DPS loss, held my Ashen for phase 2, dropped Ashen and Wings on phase 2, and nuts.
Yeah.
Um, and then the DPS nerf or all the nerfs went in, and I was like, well, we can do whatever now. The highest DPS thing is for me to push Blessing of Summer on one of our Boomkin, who are now also playing Venthyr. So I switched to Night Fae. And then we
Nice.
missed the DPS check in phase 2 because we had front loaded all of our DPS in phase 1. So I switched back to Venthyr, and then we killed them.
Gotcha. That's hilarious. Nice. All three. Look at that. Blizzard probably loves you. They're like,
Hmm.
look at
Hmm.
this.
Look at
People
this.
changing covenants. That's awesome.
Oh,
God.
I'm sure they're a huge
Well,
fan.
exactly, exactly. All right. Well then, let's maybe move a little bit forward. And we've got a couple of things from this week that were announced, or that are talked about. So going in to the hotfix, or sorry, to this week's resets is there's a bunch of DPS adjustments or just class changes
Yep.
going in. So talk about the monk one. Windwalker, all abilities are increased by 4%. So nice little 4% aura bonus.
Yep.
Doesn't apply in PvP, but so in PvE, you'll see both a little bit stronger single target, definitely some stronger AoE damage.
Yeah.
Um, and a bunch of other classes received 4% bonuses too, which makes me wonder if Blizzard developers just check boxes and they're like, we can only do one number at a time and we'll make it 4% and that works for everybody.
Rogue's got a 3% one.
Oh, well, I mean, whatever. Rogues. Sorry. But
Yeah.
Outlaw, I guess, yeah, did get a 3% damage
The one that
increase.
we really got to talk about
Yeah.
is the blood nerf, blood decay
Yeah, so
nerf.
leaving that one
Um,
off to the side.
yeah, so blood decay. Best sims I saw were around 15k DPS, which, if you're not familiar, that's DPS player DPS levels.
Mhm.
15k DPS is a lot. That's not how much people were actually doing in practice because sims, optimal situations, and everything like that. But they were doing pretty good numbers. Like Blood DK's keeping up with like the lower end of your DPS was not uncommon.
Right, yeah.
And the whole way that works is that basically the short version is that their tier set gives them extra duration on Dancing Rune Weapon. Dancing Rune
Mhm.
Weapon gives them a stacking strength buff, so if you can maintain Dancing Rune Weapon for an extended period of time, you get to keep this 75% strength buff for a long time. And when you have 75% more main stat, it turns out you do a lot more damage. So the nerf is uh, reducing the bonus duration on Dancing Rune Weapon from half a second each time you heart strike to 1/3 of a second each time you heart strike, which is a pretty big DPS nerf. It's about 20 to 25%. And
Massive.
also, pretty significant hit to their survivability too, because Dancing Rune Weapon, while it was a major DPS element this patch, also just gives you a whole lot of parry chance, just like
Mhm.
a huge amount of parry chance. Which, of course, when you don't get hit by things, you are tankier.
Makes it a little bit easier.
So this is going to increase the amount of damage they take. There's a lot of outcry over this because of the size of the nerf. Like their DPS needed this nerf. Their
Right.
survivability didn't necessarily need this nerf. So what we might see, might emphasis on the might here, is them switching their nerf out for one like to the strength stacks instead, like nerfing,
I saw
like
that mentioned. Yeah.
reducing the cap of the strength stacks, or something similar to achieve the same DPS nerf but without the nerf to the dancing rune weapon duration.
Right.
We shall see. It has sort of upended our plans because we were actually going to like our hypothetical Ragolon comp was going to be 2 blood DKs and then me on whatever tank made sense for debuffs. And the blood
Yeah.
DKs were just going to be basically DPS. DPS that can taunt and take the tank mechanic, and it was going to be great because they're just DPS.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
um,
Not gonna happen anymore. That's for sure.
but this does also mean like it's probably worth like we have the option. We just switched, so we have the option where our new tank could play Blood DK or they could play Brewmaster, and
Gotcha.
with this change, it's probably worth it for them to play Brewmaster on the Jailer instead of Blood DK because of the survivability nerfs. And the
Mhm.
Jailer has this nice 2.5 second or some shit auto attack speed, and the auto attacks can they're one shot level. Just every auto
Yeah.
attack is like one shot level. So with a Blood DK, that's a problem. With a Brewmaster, it's not.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. That's a. It was a. I heard. I saw the tweets. The Twitter
Yeah,
was a bound with some comments about
yeah,
just the buffs and nerfs in general, but the blood DK ones being the mass ones, which is why I let you introduce it because I didn't really know. I
yeah,
knew it was big. I just didn't know how big. So
yeah.
sucks to be a blood DK. I mean, play a real class like I don't know, Mistweaver Monk.
Mm.
Um. So next up we have sort of similar vein of World of Warcraft, but a little bit outside of it is there is a presentation this Tuesday by Blizzard on the new World of Warcraft really Warcraft, sorry, not World of Warcraft, but Warcraft mobile game. So set in the Warcraft universe, we are getting a mobile game.
No
Wow.
idea what it is.
Uh
We can kind of
couple
combine this in the next one because we had some leaks
yeah, put them
about.
together.
Yeah,
Yep. Yeah, so so there was a little bit of a leak. Basically, our good friend Jason Schreier, Mr. Leak over there, basically mentioned that there were two types of games in development: Pokemon Go like Warcraft game, and then a Clash of Clans like Warcraft game. The Pokemon Go version or game has been canceled based on all the reports coming out. So really, we're looking at a Clash of Clans style mobile game. Which, if you haven't played it, it's sort of like the classic. You like build up a base to like get you more resources, then like you fight people in like this 3 lane sort of thing where you send out certain units and they send out units, and it's I
yeah,
don't know if you played Clash of Clans, you get it. So that's what they're saying.
yeah.
It's going to be like a Clash of Clans style game, um, which is fine. I mean, like good for Blizzard finally tapping into the mobile market because it's literally larger than every other entertainment industry in the world at this point. So
I don't. I think we
get you a
mentioned
piece
this
of that.
last week as well, but Diablo Immortal is soon
Oh yeah, so
TM. So
yeah, so yeah, Diablo Immortal got their release date on mobile. I think it's early June, but at the same time, they're also doing a PC beta for
yeah,
it. Which if you guys, I mean, Diablo Immortal, I think is a mobile first experience. The PC client is essentially just the phone client that Blizzard's officially supporting on a PC. So the experience
it's
isn't
like
any
a
different.
Unity game, right? They,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And the idea is like your progression stays across any format you play it. So if you play it on mobile versus PC, it's the same character progression and stuff like that for Diablo Immortal. So there's no difference. Generally speaking, they're not doing anything special for the PC version. They said it's literally just the mobile client that runs on your PC. So still a mobile first game, which I mean, a lot of people are going to be maybe slightly upset with Blizzard, but like there's so much money in mobile games nowadays that like you have to, if
I mean
you want to stay afloat as a
the
game company, put some
yeah
stuff out there.
the the one thing I would be concerned about is like I'm sure they can make a good mobile game. The question is just how are they going to monetize it? That's the question in my mind. Because there's a lot of predatory monetization, and in some ways, Blizzard actually pioneered some predatory monetization with the loot boxes in Overwatch. Like Overwatch was one of the first big mainstream
Yep.
games. So I'm curious what that is going to look like.
Yep.
Um, and I guess we will see.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how. I mean, I would say that like Diablo Immortal seems like it's very much a like contained experience. So like
Yeah,
I don't see how they monetize that other than like an upfront cost for the game,
yeah,
right? If this new Warcraft game is Clash of Clans, like you can expect like money to like basically it's pay, people call it pay to win, but I feel like that's not the particular case you get. Like it's more of like pay to progress faster, you could say. So like you pay
it's pay to
to
win.
like at that well, yeah, I guess it depends on because I know that so I know I've read a couple of like studies on the way Clash of Clans does this. So this isn't the Blizzard game, but if it's like this style game, Clash of Clans does this thing which is super predatory, which is they basically match you initially against people who are bad or like bots, and you'll win, you'll win, you'll win. And then as you play more, you'll start to fight people around your level. And then as you get even deeper in, they start matching you with people that have spent a bunch of money. So the only way for you to actually beat those people is to also spend money. And so they
Yeah,
prey on that fact of you getting frustrated for losing so much that you'll spend money. So I don't know if Blizzard ends up doing that in terms of like the player or like the
that's
how
the kind
if
of
this
thing
is
that's
like that
like
game.
very difficult to suss out without a study like that, right?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
that's even more predatory than I realized because I already knew like there was the pay to win elements of Clash of Clans, right?
Right. Yeah, yeah.
But that's another level. That's
Yeah,
another
there's
level.
yeah, I'll if I can remember, I'll send you a link to what I read. But yeah, the idea was
Yeah,
like at a certain point you start just playing people who have spent more money than you, or at least are always more progressed than you, so you get upset and you spend money to like get to their level.
yeah,
Yeah. Fun times in the mobile game space. I think too, like there's a lot of people who give mobile games a bad rap, but like it's all because of those concepts. There are very good games that are only on phones that are just
yeah,
like you pay like a single cost for it. Like I can say like Monument Valley is a game that like you
yeah,
buy it once and you play.
yeah.
It's a very cool like
There's a couple different like
puzzle
really
game.
great puzzle games. Yeah, like Monument
Yeah.
Valley that are just amazing. There's also
Yeah.
I wonder if there's a mobile version of this. There's a game I just picked it up on Steam yesterday. Hang on. Dwarf Romantic. It is a little city building puzzle game that is
Oh,
very
cool.
zen, and I enjoy it a lot. And I actually hadn't thought of maybe the like if it's available on my phone, I'm going to buy it again because I got it for dollars, so worth it. But
Yeah.
that kind of thing, there's absolutely gems like that in place.
Yeah. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what Blizzard comes out with, but I think people are gonna yeah, maybe give it a bad rap off the cuff, just like they did to Diablo Immortal, which to be fair, everything that I've heard people who've played it is that it's actually a very good game. Not knowing much about how it's monetized, but like the
Yeah,
game itself, people seem to be enjoying it that have played it. So
yeah,
take that for what it is. Um, cool. Well, that's really the outside of WoW stuff to touch on this. There really wasn't much. I mean, the nerfs were the biggest thing that we've already talked through, both from a fight perspective in the raid, and then also sort of the class buffs and nerfs there. There's a couple of 9.2.5 things that came out before we get into our main topic. A couple of data mined items. So the biggest one is that Blizzard has included, based on the strengths, we don't know how this is going to be included, how it's going to be presented, but there's a new social contract that they've set up where it's
yeah,
something that you have to accept before you're actually allowed in the game. And so Wowhead's got the full text available for what's based on the strings that are in the new client. But essentially, it's like you just don't be rude and an asshole in game is what you're
yeah,
sort of accepting to do. And so it seems like this. It seems like a good thing to put in front of players. It also seems like this is potentially a much easier way for them to clean up the community. Meaning, like previously, they've been very like if you say a lot of hurtful things or hateful things in chat, you will eventually get banned, right? If you get enough
yeah.
reports against you, this seems like a very easy way to say, "Hey, you accepted this, you get one shot." And like that's it. Right? And then you're done. Like then like they can basically increase like the ban and timeout time much quicker, right?
I don't think
Um
they'll necessarily do that, but this is a good way of giving the community ammunition to self-police. Like
yeah.
before things escalate to being ban worthy, like if everybody's on the same page with this thing, then they can self-police to a greater degree. Not saying that necessarily will happen, but it is something that could result from this. One thing
Mhm.
I do think is interesting in this thing is it does So one of the things they have in the behaviors that are not accepted is spamming, advertising, or other disruptive behaviors. Advertising in particular stuck out to me because of all like we still have advertising, of course, for sales for raids, plus and things like that. So,
Right.
um, curious if that means anything or if it's like intended to be smaller in scope than all advertising. Because in some ways, like a blacksmith advertising that hey, I can craft this thing in trade chat is advertising, but it's clearly not what they mean here.
No, and I think this is much more the idea of like advertising, maybe not even like gold runs on server, but more
Right.
like go to this website and purchase a
Yeah.
boost and like
Yeah.
then we'll boost you, right? It's like that type of thing that I think they're really targeting with
Yeah.
it. But they do leave it slightly ambiguous um in terms of like what they mean. So it'll be, I mean, again, new social contract. We'll see exactly how it manifests itself, like how you actually have to accept it, where it shows up in like you just log in one day and you get it once and that's it, or is it like every month you have to like accept it? So we'll see.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that they're putting that in there. Um, I guess the other thing I don't want to yeah, we'll skip the next note, Emerson, behind the
Yeah.
scenes. We'll go to the third one, which is they're going to add in apparently the same CM ports that they have, or I guess it's the do 20s, all
Yeah.
20s ports where you could port to a dungeon. They're adding that to the raids actually. So as a part of season 4, it looks like if you clear a raid on Mythic with the faded affix active, you gain access to a port that'll take you directly to the entrance of that raid, which is a nice little touch. I think there's some other things too. There's like a pet you can earn and maybe a mount you can earn, I want to say. But the ports are interesting that they're going to add this to like basically raid achievements, which I haven't really done.
Yeah.
So um
And it looks like it's all or nothing. You either so right now they are awarded for the mythic achievement for completing all three raids
okay.
in season 4. So either you get all three of them or you get none of them. I don't think that really matters unless the tuning is like really wild on this stuff.
Exactly.
So we'll see. I'm still like hoping that they tune them to be not too bad in terms of like time spent progressing.
Hmm.
Um, but
No,
we will
agreed.
see.
Yes, yeah. It'll we'll see what they say. So
Yeah,
um
I think that
but yeah,
wraps
so
up. I think that wraps up this week's stuff. Finally, we spent a lot.
finally.
It's a lot of time on Halandras. We're about 50 minutes into this episode. 40 minutes into
Yeah,
this
yeah, yeah.
episode.
40 minutes in. So it's been a
Yeah,
Halandras nurse, I think, are pretty big. So we
yeah.
had to spend some time getting
We
that
had to
out.
spend
So
some. We had to give the crab god a good send off. Um,
yeah.
but it is
Uh,
now time to talk Dragonflight stuff. So we have some interview stuff that we're going to touch on kind of as it comes up. I think more so than anything else. Um,
exactly, yeah.
you want to get started with Evoker or with the profession stuff?
Let's do the profession stuff, 'cause then that might be a little
Okay.
bit quicker.
Okay.
And maybe a little bit. I think it's interesting. I think it's actually the more interesting of the two things. While new
Yeah.
class is always cool, I think this profession stuff is super cool. So, yeah. So basically, Blizzard, as a part of their announcement last week, talked about a huge profession revamp, essentially making it more progression based, like adding additional progression on top of just getting a higher profession level, so you can make the next sort of sort of recipe. So they talked about a couple different things in this whole thing. So I'll try and correlate my thoughts together. So
Hmm.
one of the first things they added was essentially like almost like an XP bar, very similar to how they did legendary items today, but for specific items. So you can basically, if you craft a bunch of helms, you will become a better helm crafter. So the next time you craft that helm, it will have a higher quality, which I would assume turns into more stats, higher item level, better stats, basically. So the idea is like it gives people who are very into the crafting system the ability to like target and say, yes, I want to be focused on like male helms. I want to be the male helm maker on my server and be known for that for whatever reason. Like I personally don't get it, but I did enjoy way back in the day when they used to do like profession masteries, I guess would be the best way to start it. Where I think this was BC era where
You were
you
like
had
a
like if you
potion
were
master or
Potion
a
Master or Flask Master or like yeah, what was the other one? It was Potion Flask, and there was one other one for alchemy. But then the weapons were the big one where you had like Mace Mastery, Sword Mastery, or like, and if you did the
yeah,
Mace one, you got that mace that stunned and was ridiculous with
yeah,
warriors.
stun herald.
Yeah, so I think going back there is really cool because I think that's a cool part about professions is that, and this is sort of what I've always talked about in terms of what I always enjoyed about older WoW is that like there's a bit of exclusivity in terms of like what you have, which I think
Yeah,
is better in general for the game. Like it sucks as an individual, and I'll say like I don't disagree with like if as a person I want to be able to I want to be the best at everything on one character. I
yeah,
think that is not feasible thing anymore. Like I don't think you can
yeah,
do that. I think the game becomes too watered down if you can be the best at everything at on one character.
yeah.
But if you put in time and you have like two crafters and one's going to be like your helm maker, that is going to be like your shoulder maker, you can like be the best there, right? Or if you're like a psychopath and you put in hundreds of hours into one character, maybe you can get there with everything. But the
So
idea it's not
they
as
did
well, go
clarify
ahead.
like so basically we're getting there's a couple other things to crafting beyond this like XP bar thing. So we're getting
Yeah.
crafting stats,
Mhm.
which is going to mean that you're going to have, you know, specific crafting gear that you put on while you're doing your crafts in order to make better items, or make more items as it is probably going to with like potions and flasks and things like that.
Right.
But also, we're going to be having this is light on details at this time, but some kind of like crafting talents, kind of like you're getting at with the masteries,
Yep.
where um, you're gonna start out, you're gonna have a limited number of them, but then over the course of time, you can ultimately get all of them from what they've said. So it's like you can complete everything on that character, but you're probably not gonna be able to complete everything on that character in the first 2 weeks of the patch
Mhm.
when, you know, a lot of the sales are. So you have to pick, you know, if you want to be the helm guy, you need to be the helm guy the first 2 weeks of the patch, and later on you can get the shoulders and the chest and the legs and the boots and, you know, whatever if you want
Exactly.
them.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, this seems pretty good. One of the things that I've really enjoyed, back in Cataclysm, I was doing inscription a lot, and new patch came out, tons of new minor cosmetic glyphs, and I had um, two of the really popular ones. And I was one of the only people on the server that had those recipes. And it sucked in that it was just luck. I just
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
lucky and in my inscription research for the day pulled the glyphs that were, you know, desirable.
Oh, that's I remember how they did that. Yeah, the research cards. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that sucked and it was just getting lucky and I got lucky and if I hadn't gotten lucky it would have been really shitty. But being, you know, one of the only people on the server that had that was neat because that gave me something that was, you know, mine.
Yeah.
Eventually everybody had them. But for that first couple weeks when I was the only person that had, you know, I don't even remember what the glyphs were at this point. But when I was the only person that had these like neat new glyphs, that was cool.
Yeah.
And so this seems in many ways like that, where if you're on a large server, especially, you're probably not going to be the only helm person, but there's not going to
Right.
be that many. There's going to be enough different things that people will want to specialize in that if you say, I'm going to make the best helms, you know, at the very least, you're going to be like the helm guy in your guild. There's going to be reason for there to be more than one blacksmith in the guild. It's not going to be the most efficient option, is not going to be for your guild to funnel all of the materials to one individual crafter
Right.
like it
Yeah.
was in Shadowlands.
Exactly. Yeah, that and then the other thing too that they're adding back in, which I find funny, is crafting tables. So like the
Yep.
idea, if people aren't aware, you used to on certain items have to go to a specific item, like specific area of the world that had this table where you could only craft those items if you were near that table. Um, for the original implementation of this in Classic was there was a table in Blackwing Layer where you could only craft flasks, like certain flasks, which is great. I loved having to go like clear Blackwing Layer, get to this table, and craft stuff there,
Yeah.
which was fun.
It sounds like
But
it's
no,
going
and
to be a little bit more convenient. You know, you're going to be
it'll be
able
in the
to.
it sounds like they're gonna put them in the major cities or the major city, right? So it'll be a little bit
Yeah.
easier to get to than having to clear a raid instance. But no, this is another cool thing where you might have like the crafting area and people sort of congregate around that. It's like it's a simple inconvenience, but the idea is if like you already have this inconvenience if you're a blacksmith and you want to like armor craft, or if you're a smelter and you want to smelt, or if you're a cooker and you want to cook, right? It's like adding it to other professions just isn't a huge deal, right? I'm assuming
Yeah.
like the only time I can see this being slightly annoying, and I don't even think it's that bad, is like if you need to make a bunch of potions for a raid, like in the middle of a raid.
I also
And
think it depends on what the limitations are, right? Like
yeah,
if for example you in order if it's something where let's say for alchemy, you in order to maximize the efficiency of like how many potions you get per craft, you have to be at the table. But then you
right,
can
yeah.
craft out in the world, but you're getting, 70% of the amount or 50% of the amount you would get at the table. That's okay because you can still like, oh, we need a flask real quick. Like just make the
Mhm.
flask. You know,
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
yeah, you're good. That like I think it's there's a matter like a question of degrees here. Like the
Yeah.
tables could just be effectively a massive skill boost. Like if you're at the table, these crafting stats, it just gives you a huge boost to your crafting stats.
Mhm.
Um, and then there's probably going to be some that are required for like crafting items, like that are good. Crafting gear that is good. They effectively require these tables. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they implement it, because I know in the old way, the old way they used to use them is you couldn't make the item without being near the table. So
right,
it's interesting to see that same restriction. Um, but yeah, and then I guess the other crafting, the other sort of thing I wanted to talk about, which is really my favorite part of the new professions, are the work orders. So, which this is, I think, probably the biggest change. Like the other stuff seems like massive changes to professions, but I think work orders or crafting orders, I think is what they're calling them, is massive. It's essentially the ability to, as a buyer, post on the auction house that you want something made, and it could be a soulbound item, which is actually
yeah,
huge, right? So, like
yeah,
a typically alchemy soulbound item, you can post you want to make this made, but you post in the auction house that I want to make this, I want this made. You can post I think you can post a price where like I'll tip you this much, or it's including or not including certain materials too. So like you could just say, I don't have any materials and the price that you're willing to pay for this craft is higher. Um, so like the idea is it's the ability to get those sort of soulbound items, or to basically post and say, hey, I need 100 potions made. Can someone do this for
yeah.
me? And then as a alchemy person, as an alchemist, you can make those and then sort of fill that work order, which I think is
So
it's a cool way of getting out of this trade chat like spamming sort of thing, right?
yeah. The other thing is, this is the biggest thing that they have done to dunk on auction house goblins in a long time. Like
Yeah.
the way that Shadowlands legendaries worked was the opposite of this. It was like auction house goblins heaven because the buy-in cost to make legendaries was so high that you needed a huge amount of capital in order to even enter the market. You needed to be able to eat the cost and then be able to continue selling the legendaries after.
Yep.
Um, this is the opposite. You can be just a crafter and make just an item. You can log on and be like, I'm gonna go check, the auction house and see what people are looking for. And somebody's like, you're a helm guy, somebody lists a helm that they're looking for, and you be like, oh, I can go make that. And then just
Right.
make it, and you don't have to deal with the whole cancel scanning thing that people do. You don't have to deal with having an inventory and managing that inventory and like when is it correct to just vendor it because the relisting costs are too high. you know there's all these things that go into actually like making a lot of gold on the auction house that this just sidesteps all of it. It lets people do little bits of dabbling in the auction house to use their professions to make gold
Hmm.
in a way that doesn't, you don't have to set up trade skill master for this. you, you,
Exactly.
you don't need to invest all this time in setting up this complicated auctioning infrastructure in order to sell your one item on the crafting order. Like you can just do
Exactly.
it. It's this is huge. This is really big.
And it's also helpful too, like if you do the whole, like the other thing too that I'm thinking about is like from an enchanting perspective, like typically if you're an enchanter, like you'll have a bunch of mats and like you'll be able to make enchants and sell them. But like as an individual who doesn't have an enchanter, I might just pick up enchanting mats through like if I'm in a run and something gets
Yeah,
DE'd and I win the
yeah.
roll, I'll get that enchanting mat. And now do I just sell it or do I hold on to it and then I can put it into my next
You
enchant?
remember the
Right.
like we had BOP crafting materials in basically every expansion from the Burning Crusade. It might have been in Classic too, but the Burning Crusade until BFA. Shadowlands
Right.
doesn't have any. But you remember those like title cores or whatever they were in BFA,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
how many of
Yeah.
those you ended up with, and like same thing, the like Legion Blood things in Blast Arcaris or whatever it was
Yeah.
in Legion, they just like stacked up and stacked up and stacked up, and then like 7.2 they added the vendor that you could turn them into other materials you could actually use because
Yeah.
like alchemists just didn't have a use for them.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, this is. I mean, this basically gives that sort of. Yeah, you're right. It kills got like some of the work that Goblin's going to do, but it also lets me as like even as just like an alchemist who I have alchemy for two reasons. Number one is so I can quickly make pots if I run out, so I don't have to like ask somebody for them, and it's so I get 2 hour flasks. I
Yeah,
don't sell anything on the auction house. I very rarely do shadestone transmutes. I always forget in the current stuff. But like this lets me basically go on to the auction house and be like, okay, is anybody looking for pots I can make? Make a couple
yeah,
extra gold,
yeah.
right?
It can be like, okay, I'm running low on gold. Let me go check the auction house and be like, oh, okay, these helms that I can craft, or these chest pieces that I can craft, or these potions that I can craft are
Hmm.
there's somebody that wants them right now. I can go and make those and immediately, get the gold.
Yeah,
No, like
exactly.
that's the other thing too is like anybody who's dealt with the inscription market knows that some glyphs sell like hotcakes and some glyphs don't sell at all. And the prior to Trade Skill Master, the only way to find that out was to make them all and list them all and find out the hard way that some of the ones that you spent your expensive materials on are worthless.
Aren't gonna sell. Yeah,
Um, when you flip the
yeah,
script and it's a work order instead, you can just look and go, oh, there's 3,000 people wanting this glyph and 2 wanting this one.
yeah. Seems important. Yeah, yeah. And I think Birth here in chat brings up a good point. It basically makes it, and I think I just sort of said this. It's like we don't care about making money through professions, but you want to make a little gold through it. These work
Yeah,
orders are great for just saying like, what do people want? It's like, yeah, 20 minutes make, maybe it's not hundreds of gold, maybe it's only 50 gold, right? Because that's all you get from a commission perspective, but it's still enough. It also lets you bleed off excess materials too. Like as an
yeah,
inscriptionist, like I finally have started, or sorry, as an enchanter, I finally started selling just the raw materials because I can't. Number one, I don't care what enchants are good. I'm not going to do the research, so I just
yeah,
sell the raw materials. And now I just like I have a stack of every I have or 2 stacks of dust, a stack of purple shards, and a stack of blue shards. And anything else I get, I just sell. Typically, I'm a pack rat, and I save that till the end of expansion. But
yeah. I
like,
have a bunch of materials in my Regent
yeah,
bank. I had to clear some out recently because I was running out of backspace.
yeah, so now it's like this is an easy way to like dump materials. Even like if people don't have the raw materials and they just want something crafted, you can quickly dump it and
Yeah,
do it
but I
that way.
mean,
So
you think about this from a perspective like Berthier was hitting at of just a regular player. Um,
yeah,
they're not. You don't want to make all the gold. Like making all the gold, of course, would be nice, but you don't need to make all the gold. The auction house goblin makes all the gold.
exactly. Yeah,
You just want to make enough gold to pay for the things that you want to get. You want to be able to pay for your potions. You want to be able to pay for your enchants and food and all of this stuff that you want for the content that you do. This gives you a way to make some gold.
exactly. Yeah.
This we also kind of related to that. We know there's no mission table in Shadowland or in Dragonflight,
Hmm.
which is a pretty good passive gold source if you invest time in running it. But a lot of people don't because it's I don't know, they don't like it. They don't it's out
Yeah.
of the way. You have to go back to your order hall and do it. Um so yeah.
Yeah. It's I'm excited for these profession changes for sure. I think it's the largest overhaul they've done since they started to I think really since they started to do the expansion specific progression, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then sort of dropped all the like specialization stuff and sort of homogenized a lot of it. So it'll be
Yeah.
um it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I think it'll be a good change personally, but we'll see how people enjoy it as they start to play with it a little bit. So
Yeah.
um well, cool. So that's on the profession. Do you have anything else on professions before we jump to
I mean,
some other
just
minor announcement they did?
yeah, this all sounds great to me. I'm very excited about this. I don't have the patience anymore for doing auction house stuff.
Yeah.
The auction house game is just lost. Uh, I don't care enough to spend all that time working with TSM and doing all this stuff. So this appeals to me very directly because I still like doing crafting. I
Right.
just
Yeah.
don't like doing crafting enough to deal with setting up TSM to actually make gold off.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, my auction house experience now is using, I think it's like there's some auction light add-on where like I just go to the
Yeah.
sell tab, click the thing, and it shows me what the current price is, and I just say list it for whatever the current
Yeah.
price is.
Yeah, I use that
Which
too. It's just like that's like great for selling the raw materials, not so great to figure out if it's worth turning those raw materials into an item to sell the item.
exactly, which I don't. To be fair, I just want to
Yeah.
get it out of my bags. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
so, yeah.
So, but yeah,
Um,
this all sounds great to me. I'm very happy. Like this is like obviously this is a kind of a media PR blitz for them. They want people to be excited about the expansion, but genuinely, I am excited about the features and the changes that they have announced for Dragon. It's not just like it's good because they say it's going to be good. It sounds good to me because it solves a problem that I have. So
yeah.
I'm excited.
No, yeah, the profession stuff will be super interesting. Um, to see how it's even the other stuff. I think the work orders is like the coolest part of it. As soon as they announced it, I literally screamed. I think with the
Yeah,
to the people I was watching it with, like this is the greatest thing ever. But the rest of the profession changes, we'll see how they play out. It's always, I think that's the one thing that, like, if you go back in the day, well, this might be the last comment I have on this, is like there were expansions that focused heavily on like crafting progression as a viable means of progressing in the game, right?
Warlords
Like
did
Star
this.
Wars, yeah, Warlords, but even like if you think of a whole
Oh
game around it, like Star
yeah,
Wars Galaxies did this very well in terms of
yes,
like little player cities, and like you would have your one vendor, and that vendor was an actual person, like a player, and
yeah,
like they would sell something like an item or a group of items that they had worked on crafting and leveling up and stuff like that. So
yeah,
I don't know if WoW ever gets there with professions, but this seems like a
yeah.
good enough direction to give, like, if you care about professions,
Like
like enough of a
a lot of
enough depth there
the
for it.
kind of second wave of MMOs had a very fleshed out crafting system. Like, the
Yeah.
first wave, the Ultima Online and the EverQuest kind of games, not as much. There was crafting. Like Ultima Online had like it was a major,
Yep.
but it wasn't fleshed out in the way that Star Wars Galaxy was. Anarchy Online had a very fleshed out crafting system where
Oh
like
yeah, you're right. Yeah.
there was basically a class that's like a big part of its class identity was bonuses to crafting.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, so it yeah. Then the more modern ones kind of moved away from that. But even games like Final Fantasy 14 has a very fleshed out crafting system. Um,
Oh yeah, I do hear people mentioning something. There's like this latest expansion with Final Fantasy is bad because it's like an odd number in terms of points or something, or level on crafting. Somebody was complaining about it being a weird number. Anyway,
yeah,
I know
I
nothing
don't
about
know.
that dumb game.
It's just well crafting professions in Final Fantasy because of the way that like your character can be every class at once. All of their
Okay,
crafting professions are actually just classes, and they have abilities
gotcha.
as well crafting. So it's actually much more fleshed out than even what we're going to get here. I don't think what Final Fantasy does is necessary for most people's level of engagement with crafting, but there are people who love that, and more power to them.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right, so I think we've drained our profession maybe discussion for today. And let's move over to the new Invoker class, I guess. So one thing I think we mentioned on last week's podcast, but spent zero time on it because I don't think you or I either wanted to deep dive into it because it's just just really an announcement of it with no real detail behind it. But they did announce basically two things. They announced a new class and a new race. Essentially, they're the
Yes.
same thing because Drakthir as a race can only be invokers, and invokers as a class can only be a Drakthir. So, like, essentially, it's a race class combo,
Yeah.
um, sort of deal. But similar to the way, like, I actually know the original monks, you could be not pandas. So bad
Monks
example.
could
So
be
this is
anything. The closest analog
yeah.
is actually, well, in some ways, it is actually the races from Burning Crusade, uh, where you
Oh,
got
when paladins were
Draenei,
added.
and the only shaman on Alliance were Draenei. The
Mhm.
only paladins on the Horde were Blood Elves. Um, another, the other one that maybe
Actually,
is
in classic druids could only
yeah,
be Tauren or night
Night
elves.
Elf. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and that's not exactly a one-to-one relationship. Like it's Demon Hunters have that same thing where like only Night Elves and Blood Elves can be Demon Hunters. but
Yeah.
they can all be other classes too.
Exactly. Yeah.
Evoker and Drakthir are one and the same right now, although Ian did indicate that they were open to allowing Drakthir to be other classes, which makes sense because there's not really a reason that you couldn't have a Drakthir warrior. Like, warrior is just me, big me, smash, right? Like, there's not a lot
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
special requirements there. If we can have a gnome warrior, we can have a Drakthir warrior. Which I
Exactly.
guess for those that maybe have missed it, Drakthir are just humanoid dragon things. Like if you remember, there's that boss in Blackwing Descent. There's a Drakthir boss in Blackwing Descent. Uh, I don't remember its name, but they've popped up here and there. It's that kind of thing where, bipedal, standing up, Argonian looking, like if you've played the Elder Scrolls games, kind of lizard people with wings, that you can use to glide. It's like a racial ability. You can glide with them. You can't fly with them. Like Demon Hunter, you cannot fly with them, but you can glide.
Yep.
Um,
Yes. Oh, sorry.
yeah,
Sure.
it's so what the because Drakthir in WoW have been pretty rare. I think a lot of people don't realize that they have actually shown up. Like, this is not the first we're seeing this style of draconic thing. Wow.
So they were, and to be fair, I want to say they were actually, maybe they weren't called Drakthir, but in Blackwing Lair, there are bipedal dragon, like massive dragon things that
Yeah,
swing like a
the
polearm at you.
big, yeah,
Yeah, and they guard certain, like I think they guard the room heading into Chromagus. There's like three of them
yeah,
there that you fight after Ebon Rock and Flame Gore or whatever.
yeah,
They have been in the game, not in this style, we'll say. So
yeah.
this style is much smaller, much more humanoid, I'd say, or human-like. Um, but yeah, no, it's they've been around, so it'll be yeah. So we have Drakthir, we basically have dragon dudes, people,
Yep,
um, which will which is I think is cool. So a new race, which will be fun.
yep,
And then yeah, Invoker is a class, basically another two spec class, which
yep,
is just like Demon Hunters were.
yep.
Um, only this
Uh,
time it's what damage
Healer
and
and
healing, right?
range DPS. Yeah.
Yep.
So no tank, thankfully. Like I commented in our speculation episode, I didn't want them to add another tank because they still haven't figured out how to make vengeance like good. Not good in like a numbers level, because it's been good in a numbers level multiple times, but good in like a distinct mechanical identity way.
Yeah.
And like Death Knight is the Death Strike tank, and Paladin is the Wog shield utility tank, and Brewmaster is the tank that doesn't die ever at all under any circumstances.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Good brewmasters. Yeah, no. So I mean, we're only getting a ranged attack and a ranged healer spec. So um that'll be interesting. It's funny too. So like they had a couple intro videos, and so they showed off some of the like animations and casting abilities. And I don't know about you, but I was a little upset, I'll say, about the fact that their damage dealing abilities were very red, right? And their healing
yes.
abilities were very green. However, the red Dragonflight, literally Alex Straza is known as the life binder, essentially like the Dragonflight that gives life. So why is everything green? Because green is, of course, Ysera and like
Yeah.
the green Dragonflight, which is very much like the mystery people, right? Aren't they like the Emerald Dream
Yeah.
type Dragonflight? So
It's
a little
funny.
upset about
So
that.
the red dragonfly, also known for fire.
Right.
Um,
But healing fire,
yeah, healing fire, which would have been a neat aesthetic. Also, might have been a little bit visually confusing with all the other things that are setting you on
no, that's
fire.
exactly why they did it. Like I can tell, like that's exactly why they did it. Just from a visual perspective, it's like green is typically good, red's typically bad. They can't make red circles on the ground that you want to step in because it's healing you be a thing. Like it just
Yeah,
doesn't work that way. So no,
yeah.
it's more of a joke.
I,
But
it, I think there is a little bit of legitimacy to that though, which is why it's a good joke. Is
yeah,
um, because you're right. The Red Dragonflight has been, Alex Strauss and the Lifebinder. They've been like if you've played through Dragonblight in Wrath of the Lich King, like you've interacted with the Red Dragonflight and their dragon shrines in Dragonblight.
Yep.
Seen that. So
In the healing fire. Yeah. It's just funny, but no. So we get this new class. It's a range damage dealer and a ranged healer. They're also mail wearers, if we talked about last time, which will be the first new mail class
ever.
ever in the
It's
game.
actually
Which
so you remember way back in the day, um Paladin Warrior started off wearing mail and then progressed into wearing plate.
yep.
So in some ways, we've regressed also from like the utility of, although it was never an end game thing. Even in vanilla, you progressed out of wearing mail before
Yeah.
level 60. So, um, but it is kind of funny.
Yeah. And then like similarly like shaman and hunters who are max level mail wearers and classic started with leather and they also progressed, which is a cool progression. But yeah, it's only been shamans and hunters wearing mail since essentially the start of the game as sort of their end game armor, and now we're getting our third class finally wearing mail. So we
Yep.
stopped DEing or letting that stuff rot, which is cool. So they will wear mail, which is awesome, fun. And we really don't know much beyond just this. Like we know they're going to have a healing spec, we know they're going to have a damage spec, we know they're going to wear mail, we know that they're going to be mid. They say the word mid range, which to me just means they're ranged. I don't no one has been able to explain, like all the interviews ask about this and they're like, well, they're not like super long range like hunters, but it doesn't mean they're like going to have their own little 25-yard clump from the boss and where you're going to put all your invokers, right? It seems like
Yeah.
they're just not going to have that 40-yard range set of spells, probably in the 30 to 35-yard range, right? Which is
Yeah.
fine.
It's, I don't, I mean, I kind of understand it because at some point the kind of animations you can do for the dragon breath and stuff like that kind of breaks down
Right,
for
yeah.
40 yards. So there's like an animation issue. Because the part of the reason that Evoker is a Drakthir only class, and I can pull up actually some of these gifs that they've got on Wowhead, is that all of the abilities are tied to you being a Drakthir, you having like a you are a dragon,
Yep.
like so you can do dragon breath. You can do there's this flying attack where you literally like strafe people and you breathe fire on them. And that sounds like it's going to be a nightmare animation lock thing like I-beam is, but it looks cool. It looks super cool.
Yep.
So, um
Yeah.
yeah. So there is an animation issue there where like if you're 40-45 yards away from the boss and you're like doing this breath cone in front of you, is it gonna hit anything? But then again, like there's literally dragon's breath on fire mage that is a
Right, yeah.
cone. It's not a 40-yard cone though. It's just like 20 yards in front of you or whatever. So not all of them. I guess the restriction is if it's a rotational ability, and it's shorter range, and that's the range you effectively can play at.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So maybe that's why they said mid-range. We'll see. And the other interesting thing about their abilities is they've added this, or they've talked about this thing called empowered abilities, which essentially is like depending on how long it's an ability you can charge up. You basically can hold the button down, or I think they said you can either toggle it, right? So it's either you
Yeah,
hold to charge up or you toggle it to charge up and toggle it off depending on
they actually
the
talked a lot about
accessibility options.
accessibility. Yeah,
Yeah, so one of the accessibility options is like you have it in its power. So the way it works is essentially you charge up the ability and then you unleash a stronger version of it the longer you charge it up.
yeah,
And whether that's through holding the specific keybind down, or it seemed like there's a way to do a toggle where you can toggle it to start the power up and maybe toggle it again to
yeah,
execute it or trigger it.
yeah.
It'll be another cool thing about empowered abilities. I actually enjoy stuff like this where it's like
There's a
there's sort of a
timing
game
element
you
to it.
play. Yeah,
Yeah,
like a timing of like, do I have enough time to empower this strong enough to make it useful, or should I like move out of this like breath the boss is about to do and then use
yeah.
it, right?
There's also
Um,
the other way to think about these is instead of it being like a spell that gets stronger, it's a spell where if you have to interrupt it early, you still get something. Like if you think about hard
Right.
casting a pyroblast, right? If you sit there for 4 seconds and you hard cast a pyroblast and you complete it, you get your pyroblast. Great. Part of the cost of it is that if you have to move early, you don't get anything. If you have to
Exactly.
move after
Yeah.
3.5 seconds, then you get nothing. There's no pyroblast. You don't get, you know, 90% of a pyroblast. You get 0% of a pyroblast.
Yeah.
This is different because now if you get to 90% in power this whatever ability, it looks like from the UI they showed this like there's like the base level if you just like push the button and
Tap it.
let it
Yeah.
go. Then there's one level where you empower it like 30%, and another one where you empower it like 2/3, and then maybe there's extra things for empowering it fully. But if you don't get to empower it fully, you still get 2/3 of your ability, or
Right.
one
Exactly.
third of your ability. So you still get something if you have to move early. It, in some ways, it lets you get away with being a little bit greedier, unless you
Yeah.
absolutely have to get the max in power off. Then you can you can start casting. Maybe you get targeted by something. Maybe a puddle spawns under you and you just have to move, and you can just you know fire off the ability and move,
Right.
and
Yeah.
you still get something.
Right. Yeah. And it's, I think too, like it depend, like the interesting thing, at least from like looking at this from a healer perspective, is like with the assumption being like the mana cost will generally stay the same depending on the empower, then you
Right.
basically, you give up efficiency for like getting something off quicker in these cases where like you're using it without the full empower, which is something that like Mistweaver to an extremely less extent sometimes sees with like canceling Essence Font early since you still
Yeah.
pay the full mana cost for that upfront, or using Vivify with like one or no renewing miss out just because you
Right.
need something to top someone off, which is a terrible idea anyway, but like you can
Yeah.
do it. So, um,
There's existing things like this as well, where if you in some way like the idea of empowering an ability of sometimes you have the ability that's more efficient or less efficient. We're getting into very like spiky territory.
yeah,
If you think about like um, going into a cooldown window, a lot of classes have this thing where you set up for your cooldown and you push all your cooldowns and you do a ton of damage. But if you don't get to do your full setup, there's this opportunity cost of like, you don't get to hold down the button for 4 seconds prior to doing your cooldown. So your cooldown is not as long.
exactly, yeah,
Something like Touch of the Magi for an arcane mage is very sensitive to your setup. If you
yeah,
have a great setup for it, Touch of the Magi is just like the godliest ability. If you don't get a chance to do your setup, it's like pretty medium.
pretty
Um,
weak.
so Berthier has this in chat. So Ian said it's a mix between preservation. Evoker is a mix between a resto shaman and a disc priest, meaning stacked healing and a lot of absorbs, which is apparently giving them nightmares about Siege of Orgrimmar.
Yeah, which I mean, it's yeah, like yeah, yeah. I just absorb healers are just the bane. Like no, so here's the thing about absorb healers, and like if they actually go this direction, it's gonna be slightly upsetting, particularly if they harken back to Siege of Orgrimmar or any like Warlords of Draenor style absorb healer. Is that they're both awful to play and they're awful to play with. They're awful to play because literally all your healing is like putting up shields. As long as you put up all your shields, there's nothing else to do. There's no like reactivity. It's all proactive.
Right.
And number two is everyone else on your raid team hates you because there's literally nothing to heal if you do your job and put up all your shields.
Yeah.
Like
It's a little bit like Spirit Shell and Castle Nathria, right? If you had a good disc priest, they could
that's true,
do
yeah.
the ramps like on Sludgefist. If you had a good disc priest, they could get off their ramps every minute for every pillar. Nobody else needed to touch those. You had massive shields
Yeah.
on the whole raid, and I actually had set up my raid frames at the time to show absorbs on people, and just seeing all the absorbs like blow up after they got there, like you see all the atonements pop up, and there's like little shields out, and then they like hit all their buttons and they spirit shell and boom, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, and that was one like there was people who remember older content from a healing perspective, like that's a
yeah,
very good example. But imagine that just being the way that a disc priest healed all the time.
yeah.
And there was no
So
ramp for it. There was just hit shield every 3
so the
seconds
other thing
or
is uh stacked healing. Like
yeah.
imagine if it's your F-low and your F-low puts on out barriers. Like if that's how it works. That's a lot more limited, right? If you can stack, then it's pretty good. But if
Right.
you
Yeah.
can't stack, then you're getting, 4 people get shields. Your melee clump gets a shield, but you can't do the disc priest thing of like, oh, the whole raid has bubbles.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's just it also will then like that class is going to be dependent on raid fight
Yeah,
design, right? Because like you'll notice there was a not a ton of shamans in the raid this tier, primarily
right.
because I think Holy Priest and um
Holy Priest is
Holy
about
Priest
a
is so
temper
good and
healer.
like
There wasn't a lot you
yeah,
could stack for. Like Bragalon needs you to
exactly.
be spread out. Halandris
Yeah.
needs you to be spread out. Lords of Dread needs you to be spread out. I don't actually know if
Yeah.
the jailer needs you to be spread out, but there's certainly not a whole lot of time that you can just stand still and plant as a raid.
Exactly. Exactly. So we'll see. But no, it'll be interesting to see what this healing class looks like cuz like I mean the last new healing class they added was the Mistweaver monk and to be fair at launch like it was a very good healing class. Um
Yeah,
I think it suffered from the biggest thing
it
monk
suffered from
suffered from
smart
was how
healers or smart heal,
well
smart heal.
that and you had to level it from 1. So
Oh
that's actually
yeah,
the biggest deterrent I think is like you had to
speaking
level
of,
that class from 1. This is a hero
speaking
class.
of,
Sorry, that's the other thing. Invokers are a healer class.
yeah, you're gonna start
Hero
at
class.
level 50. Let me actually pull it up.
Is it?
You start at level 50. You level through Shadowlands. Oh, you start at level 58.
Yeah.
So it's very much like Demon Hunter. Demon Hunter, if you remember when Legion came out, it started at level 98. You did your class starting zone. You came out at about level 100 and you jumped straight into Legion zones and you leveled to 110. Um, right?
Yep.
Am I getting the levels right?
Yeah. Similar thing
Uh,
with Blood DK, right? They started it. I think they were a little lower, like
well,
55 at the time,
yeah, so they
but you had to
started at
do this
55.
scenario.
You would come out at level 58 and you would do your 12 levels or your 10 levels through the Burning Crusade and then you would go into North.
Oh, that's right. Different. You're right.
So this
Sorry.
time around, you're not going to have to go back through the Shadowland zones. You're going to be able to just jump right into the Dragonflight zones on your Evoker. It is also, they are initially starting with um, the old style Demon Hunter and DK cap of 1 per character per realm or per account
Yeah.
per realm. So you're not going to be able to make 10 different evokers on your realm on launch. But with things like cross faction play coming, it's not going to be as big of a deal. You're
Yeah.
not going to feel the need to make like an alliance one and a horde one. You can just make a horde one or make an alliance one and play with everybody. So,
Yeah. No, yeah,
um,
that is the yeah, I guess it's a good news that they don't start as low. I think that's the one thing that has hurt Monk for a while,
yeah,
and it's much less of an issue now. But at least its initial player base was so small, just because you had to start at level 1, which I
yeah,
spent too long before that getting free level ups from the old recruiter friends.
yeah.
So
And there was the old, like, I think this is gone now, but the old monk experience buff, I think they took that out with the leveling revamp.
I think the buff is still there, but it used to give you stats too. So I think they took out the stats portion of it, but I
Okay.
don't remember.
Well, it
I've been
was
leveling
like a
forever.
50% experience buff that you could just have.
Right.
But it was set up differently. Like you could have it for an hour a day, but if you went a few days, just like going back to the peak and just turning in the quest, you could stack it up for like a day's worth of it. But you had to actually log in to
Exactly.
do that. So it was something where like if you logged out for 3 or 4 days and then logged into your monk again, you still only had an hour of it. Which is the other
Exactly.
thing. I think that was it should have just been you could have a day of it every time you turned in the quest, and it just like would go back up to a day. It wouldn't stack duration or anything like that. Just let you have the buff, the XP buff. But
Yeah, that's true. Um, all right. There's a question in chat. Maybe we do that
okay,
now, and then we can. There's one other thing I wanted to touch on. One of those final
yep,
interviews before we end. So there's a
yep.
question in chat from Kyle Renfro. Thank you for the question. Kyle, of course, asked. He said, or they said they asked last week. To be fair, Kyle, I don't remember your question, but I remember people asking about does ancient teach of the monastery. The question last week, I think, was, will it be built into the base class? If they were, we were rework Mistweaver. Almost positive my answer at that point was no.
I think it
Um,
was during their speculation episode.
oh, probably, yeah. But then the question, the follow up that Kyle has for this week is essentially, do I think that ancient teachings of the monastery will become a talent now that they're going to revamp talent trees? And I'd say there's a pretty good chance ancient teachings makes it into the talent tree. Um, if anything, like as just an option, I think it actually ends up so definitely in the talent tree and probably its own square. I don't think it ends up being one of those hexagons where you have to pick between ancient teachings and something else. I
Hmm.
think it just becomes something you can talent into. Um, and also from my perspective, I bet you it ends up being fairly mid tier in the talent tree. It does like
Yeah.
ancient teachings to me isn't a starter talent, isn't an ending talent. It's probably something that'll be in the middle,
Yeah.
something you can pick up and then go elsewhere in the tree. So
Well, as far as positioning, I've been leveling a mage recently, and it's
uh,
funny how the fire spec just doesn't work until like level 35. Like it just doesn't work because it takes that long for you to get enough crit talents that you can actually like cast a pyroblast without sitting there for a million years. It takes that
that's
long
awesome.
to get your second charge of fire blast and make it castable while casting so that you can actually like do combustion and not have to
Yeah,
sit there hard casting a fireball during your combustion every single time. Um,
that's hilarious.
it so like the spec has issues where it just doesn't really work until you reach like level 35 and then suddenly it becomes like pretty fun. Something like ancient teachings, I don't think they're going to put at the end of the tree for that reason. They're going to want to put it earlier because it's one of those like core playstyle things where like imagine if they put, you know, all of that fire stuff in order to make combustion work was at the end of the tree. Like now you
Yeah.
really can't play fire until level 70. Same thing with ancient teachings of the monastery. They're going to want to put that maybe not as a starter point, but 5 or 10 levels in instead of 40.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. It's definitely like a mid tier type talent, but it'll definitely be a talent. I think it's just they just enjoy it a little too much. It's becoming core to Mistweaver
Yeah,
more and more. And to be fair, like I don't mind this iteration of like because Ancient Teachings is a play on Eminence, which Eminence was like the original talent.
yeah,
I don't think we'll ever get Eminence back just because
too
it's
good.
too passive. Well, yeah, I mean, it's they've gotten away from this whole like the ability of just like having passive healing for doing nothing, right? And that's what
Yeah,
Eminence was. It's like you put down a statue, and as long as you were auto attacking, you got healing on it. And at that point, it was smart healing, so it would heal like your lowest HP,
yeah,
party member. So now I think they leave Ancient Teachings where it is. And they leave the activation. You have to hit something to activate it and then use it. I wish I would get rid of Essence Font, but that's a different conversation. But no, I think Ancient
yeah.
Teachings ends up in the talent tree, probably
I
mid tier. So
I do think that they basically I think there's a two step litmus test that you can do to decide if some piece of borrowed power is going to end up being a talent.
mhm.
Test number one: was it popular? If it wasn't popular, it's not coming back. Okay,
Yep.
or it's unlikely to come back. If they needed to fill out a tree or it serves some purpose, then it could. But if it's not popular, I wouldn't bet on it. Two, was it problematic? So you can see like an example of this. Convoke the Spirits is in the Druid talent trees that we've seen. Popular,
Mhm.
not problematic. There's like some PvP problems with it, but they solve those. Um,
Yeah.
Ravenous Frenzy, not in there. Not super popular, but very powerful. So powerful in such like broad circumstances that it was actually problematic. I don't think it's coming back. Like we obviously haven't seen the whole tree, but I would be shocked if Ravenous Frenzy is in the tree.
No, that's fair. Yeah. Yeah, so it'll be interesting. I can't wait for alpha to launch and we can actually start to see what their initial thoughts are on trees.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
um, well, cool. Well, I know we only have 5 minutes left, and there was one other thing I wanted to touch on, and it's
yep,
really just a portion. So, Ian was interviewed by Asmongold this week, which is actually a very good interview. I think people give Asmongold a bad rap, but I think he actually is a very smart individual when he's not playing Asmongold as a character on stream. In any event, the one question that Asmongold did ask was around Master Loot. And Ian's response was actually one of the better ones that that we've seen, which is maybe maybe we give Ian too much of a hard time. So his response was essentially like Ian as a person kind of wants it back, but WoW as a team, they've sort of been resistant to it. And the idea is basically the reason that Master Loot went away and why they went fully to personal loot is what they were talking about was the idea of, I guess at the time they were maintaining two different loot systems, right? Like they were maintaining, there was a personal loot system along with master looting, and the ability to switch between the two was causing too many headaches from a technical perspective. They basically said, of the two, which one do we keep? At the time, the team said we want to keep personal loot, shift everybody to personal loot. So what Ian's basically point was like, the door is not shut on ever going back to master loot, but if they go back to master loot, there's going to be like it's an all or nothing thing. So it's not a master loot plus personal loot, some sort of hybrid. It's like, well, maybe you have personal loot. His example is maybe they have personal loot in open world content, but master loot in any sort of instance like organized content, and that's the way they go. But keep in mind that going back to full master loot does always come back to those situations that we used to have back in the day where like you might get drops that are unusable. Like you might get a bow drop in a group that has no hunters. You might get 3 pieces of Nemesis gear, which is the Warlock tier 2 set, with only one Warlock in the raid, and that Warlock already having 8 piece, right? Like there is the
Yeah.
chance that gear just rots in your raid, which
Already happens with personal loot. That's not a problem
yeah,
that
I
goes
mean,
away. Like we killed prototype Pantheon this week and we got 0 pieces of useful loot from it.
right. Which and I well, so my contention is it doesn't go away. It seems like it goes away because you get to put loot where you want. Because
It's
like the
it
idea with
feels
like the
better.
way
It's all feel.
I mean, yeah. Because I mean, the idea is you can still kill like prototype Pantheon the first time and get a bunch of those shitty trinkets that no one wants. And like, what are you gonna do with those? Like, you get 3 of them, and you're like, well, essentially, it's rotting, and it's our first kill, and we got nothing to show for it, right? Like, that's still an option. Where like in personal loot, you may get like an item level upgrade for a certain piece for someone. You know,
Yeah.
generally personal loot comes with more loot, so like you're gonna be generally less pieces of loot across your raid and master loot potentially.
I think the
So
idea initially with that was, and I don't know if they would actually do that again. The idea was that
yeah,
personal loot was less efficient, so you got more loot to compensate for it being less efficient because you couldn't give it to specific people.
right.
I think the idea that personal loot is less efficient is outdated. If you're not optimizing personal loot, if you're just a regular Joe guild, and you're not optimizing personal loot, it is less efficient. But I think the level of splits and the kind of splits that have been done have demonstrated that it could be dramatically more efficient
Right.
if
Yeah.
you're setting things up in order to abuse it. So I don't know. Like this is definitely an area where they have to be thinking about regular guilds and not what the world first guilds are going to do, because
Right.
most guilds are not like if you're just your heroic guild does personal loot because they don't want to deal with master loot drama, which is probably correct. Then they maybe should get more loot because it is going to be less efficient for them than running master loot. Um, but yeah, he did comment on quote, there's a lot of problems with it in terms of training rules and items that are technically an item level upgrade but aren't actually an upgrade. This is me quoting from the Wowhead article that quoting Ian
Yeah.
Hazzikostas. Yeah. Yep, that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to see Master Loot back. I like even as like not a top tier guild or even like a like just
Yeah.
like a middling like mythic guild, like it does still feel bad like when I get an item that I know I'm never gonna equip and I can't trade it. Like
Yeah.
it sucks getting like it sucks getting like it sucks getting a helm that I can't trade. Like, I got a heroic helm
Yeah.
for my tier set, which like I couldn't trade because I wear like a legendary in my helm slot, but I can't trade it. I haven't
Yeah.
gotten it before, and so it's just like I don't know. It kind of sucks for that. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see if they actually go back to Master Loot. I'd be excited to start
Yeah,
to
me
bring
too.
that back. I think it's fun.
Uh
And yeah, I think that's maybe time. That was the only thing. So and the
yeah.
Asmongold interview covers on some other stuff. So go check it out. It actually was a really good interview. But that was the big thing that
Yeah.
that Ian had, and then of course the whole what
What
sword at
sword?
the end. Yeah,
Yeah.
which makes me think maybe we're gonna do something with that sword.
Maybe so, maybe so. But
Oh,
I think that is going to bring us to the end for this show today. Thank you all for watching and for listening. If you enjoyed this show and you want to support it and the other work that we do over at the Peak of Serenity, you can do that over at our Patreon at patreon.com/Peak of Serenity. But that is it for the show today. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next week.
bye.